I want to thank you all for tuning in today. This is Minister G.L. Hart, and we welcome you to the By His Blood Ministries Saturday evening worship service. We're so honored to be here and to be able to bring you a word from the ages. A word that is from God, that has been spewed down from heavens to be given to the people of God in these changing times. Tonight we're going to talk about integrity. So often in this world, we're looking at so many different numbers dealing with unemployment. There was a study recently came out saying that the 2012 numbers of unemployment, which stated that unemployment was getting better, was actually a false report. And it was geared towards helping the president become reelected. So many things like that that is plaguing this society, dealing with political issues, social issues, and all at the same time, people who have power decide to sit and do nothing. Yet, what about ordinary people when they sit and do nothing? As if what happened with a young lady who was being beaten on the train, an elderly woman, caught on camera and then put on Facebook. And yet no one came to this young woman, this elderly woman, rescue, as this young woman beat this woman for at least 15 minutes, taunting her, pulling her clothes, slapping her. When no one is watching, what are you hiding underneath your covers? Where is your integrity? Where's your loyalty? Where is your respect? Where's your faith? And most of all, where's your God? So we're going to be talking about integrity tonight, coming out of the book of Genesis, one of a story dealing with Joseph. And as you all know what happened to Joseph, he was tricked by his brothers who was jealous of him. And eventually he was thrown into a pit, a jail, if you will. And there, despite Joseph's sorrows and hardship and betrayal by his own brothers, his faith in God never wavered. Continuously, Joseph gave God the praise and the honor, and he was a great representative for God and the kingdom on how he lived, even as a prisoner, as he was in the pit, and then he was granted to the palace. Wonderful story. And I hope tonight that when this message ends, that you begin to activate all the gifts inside of you, dealing with who you are and whose you belong to. And that when things may arise, and you have the opportunity to do what's right or to do what you can get away with, you put God first and do what God would want you to do. Almost like when people have these banners or these t-shirts that say WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's all about integrity. And if we're going to move to the next dimension, we're going to have integrity while doing this, because there are going to be opportunities when we can do some devious things in this world and to some wonderful good people, lying and cheating, swindling. But you got to understand that no matter what you do, God sees all things. He's omniscience. He knows your move before you even make your move. So let's get into this text tonight and look at it in detail from the life of Joseph. God's aim and our goal is to be winners and champions, completed every good work pleasing to Him. And as we begin to study the life of Joseph, we'll find that God is at work through all of his trials and disappointments Joseph faced. His triumphs clearly reflect the overcoming power that God has made available to those who firmly committed to holy, uncompromising lives. Such people refuse to reflect less than the best of God working in them, regardless of their situation or circumstances. They are the winners and the champions of God. And as you begin to meditate on this, I want you to lay hold of these principles that God wants to work in you to make you the kind of champion He can be well pleased with and can use for His glory. When we look at Hebrews chapter 13, verse 20 and 21, it reads from the New King James Bible. Now may the God of peace who brought up our Lord from Jesus from the dead, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant. Verse 21 reads, make you complete in every good work to do His will, working in you what is well pleasing in His sight, through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7 through 10 reads, and I'm reading from the King James Bible again. This is, for we walk by faith and not by sight. Verse 8, we are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Verse 9 reads, therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well pleasing to Him. Verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of the Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Joseph had a dream that his brothers hated him. In Genesis chapter 37, verses 2 through 11, it reads, this is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Verse 5 reads, now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Verse 6, so he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field. And then behold, my sheaves arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his fathers rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. We look at Genesis chapter 37, verse 13, and then 18 through 20, when it says, and Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. In verse 20 it says, come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into the pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. If you look at the qualities of a weak character, look at Reuben, the eldest brother, the so-called leader. In Genesis chapter 37, verses 21 through 25, it says, but Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. Verse 22, and Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. Verse 23 says, so it came to pass when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Verse 24, then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Verse 25, and they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing spices, balm, myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. Here we are in Genesis 37, chapter 24. Joseph has been thrown into a pit, and the tunic that they're talking about is more or less a coat, a fine linen that his father Israel, who is actually Jacob, made for Joseph. Fine linen. And his brothers hated him because his father favored him. And when we look at Genesis chapter 37, verse 29 and 30, it says, then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. In verse 30 it says, and he returned to his brothers and said, the lad is no more, and where shall I go? When we look at Reuben, the elder brother, one thing we learn about Reuben, how he failed, was Reuben was acting in deception. He was also operating in appeasement and compromise and fearing a man. Reuben showed poor character. And through his poor character, it would shadow him through the rest of his life, because Reuben really tried to manipulate and fool his brothers so he could later come back and free Joseph, but he failed. One thing about integrity, it never worries about what people will say. It never risk what is too precious to lose. Reuben lost his brother. He lost his integrity. He lost his self-respect and the respect of others and his leadership position in their family. So here we are, Reuben is boxed in with nowhere to go. His weak character worked its way into his attempts to save his brother. He wove a web of deception, appeasement, and compromise. Both he and Joseph were snared by it. Actions taken without integrity and wholeness bring consequences that are not easily undone. So yet when we look at the qualities of integrity, on one side we see Joseph having no qualities of integrity, but then we look at Joseph and how his character took him from the prison to the palace. In Genesis chapter 39, verses 2 and 3, it reads, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." Verse 3, "And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hands." Genesis chapter 39, verse 9 and 12 reads, "There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" She caught him by his garment, saying, "Lay with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and ran outside. Wonderful scripture this is. And what I love about it is the fact that the Lord was with Joseph. And even his master saw that the Lord was with him. And all he did to prosper in his hand. Listen, when God is with you, who can be against you? Even your enemies can see the way you walk, your character, your integrity. Even when you are in a prison, bottom of the barrel, no job, no income, but you're walking in glory. You're walking in excellence. People will begin to awe you, not because of who you are, but how awesome God is. Joseph lived and breathed integrity. When the Egyptian king's wife tried to make advances against him, he simply refused to even think about compromising with sin. He ran from it. And as he ran from the temptation, he drew nearer to God. Notice the contrast between Joseph and his brother Reuben. Reuben was basically, he was a good man, but he lacked the strength of character. Wonderful people in this world, but when put to the test, too often they fail. You can go from the White House to Wall Street. Men and women starting off with great intentions and great character, wonderful integrity. Yet when they find the opportunity to make more money illegally or swindle people out of their homes as the banking institutions did, soon they lose their integrity and their character. Psalms 1 verse 1 through 3 reads, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the river of water, that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper." All through this, you're reading that even folk that the wealthy, the powerful, the wicked thinks they at the bottom, they don't have anything. But his scripture tells us when a man walks in great character, great integrity, even God will move mountains for them. So many times in my life I had an opportunity to do a lot of devious things, dealing with selling drugs, lying on taxes, lying on a time clock, on a tip report, or even when I worked at the airport, people would leave laptops, cell phones constantly, iPads all over the place, wallets. One time a woman was in a place I worked at the airport, and she was in such a hurry and first time flying, and she was just so nervous that she left her envelope when she paid for her food. It was an envelope, and she left it on the table, and she was gone with the blink of an eye. It was already on the plane. Yet when I looked down and I saw the envelope, I gave it back to the ticket counter person, the boarding person, and I described the lady to them, and they were able to get on the plane and return her money. And the lady sent back a $20 bill, which I wasn't concerned about the money. But the young lady, the stewardess, said, "Did you know that it was $5,000 in there? Wow. You blessed." That's the kind of character God is seeking in us. The integrity. So easily I could have pocketed that money. And by the time she got back or got to her destination, she may have not known what had happened, because she didn't give the money to me. She left it on the side of a table and just ran off. And what's so awesome is, it was so busy that God had me at that particular place at that particular time for a reason. Because there were many people walking by, and had I not seen it myself, surely someone else would have. Take special note of the urgency in Joseph to put distance between himself and temptation. When you look at James chapter 1, verse 13 through 15, it reads, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone." Verse 14 reads, "But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, bring forth death." How do we resist this temptation? Easily. James chapter 4, verse 7 through 10 tells us, "Therefore submit to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Verse 8, "Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." Verse 9, "Lament and mourn and weep, and let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom." Verse 10, "Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up." So I want to give you some principles dealing with integrity. I'm going to give you 3. When you're talking no deception, no appeasement, no compromise, no fear of man, just excellence and character. And number 1 is the principle of integrity is doing the right thing. It may cost you. It may bring you difficulties. It may seem to be a bigger price than your integrity is worth. That is never the case, because there's no refund. If you spend your integrity, you will find that it cannot be bought back. You will own what you have bought. There are no refunds. Number 2, principle of integrity. Integrity is always worth more than the price you pay to keep it intact. Number 3, You will never know what God has waiting for you unless you make integrity your constant companion on your journey through life. So important, people, that you understand that no matter how things may seem, again, I could have kept that money. And there were so many other instances where people have left wallets and laptops, and I could have simply kept it. But I know that God is waiting for me, and He has something greater for me. What God has for me, it is for me. I don't have to steal it, hide it, swindle it, lie to get it, hide documents, fudge documents, get somebody to lie for me, co-sign for me. I understand clearly how the integrity of me as a child of God reflects my life. And not just your life, your family's life. Because the same spirit that you walk with, your children and your children's children shall have upon them as well. Genesis chapter 39, verse 16 to 20 says, so she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Verse 17, then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. Verse 18, so it happened as I lifted my voice and cried out that he left his garment with me and fled outside. Verse 19, so it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, then that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. And this caused all from the king's wife lying on Joseph and telling the king that Joseph had tried to rape her or have sex with her. So out of anger, the Egyptian king put Joseph into a pit. All because she was still upset because Joseph ran from her. One thing about integrity as well, disappointment is inevitable. Misery is an option. It's optional. Disappointment can also, it is a great opportunity for your next appointment with God. So wonderful. It's up to you. You can be bitter, have self-pity, unforgiveness, and feel worse because of what you've done. Or doing the right thing sometimes may cost you. But what that does, it sets you up for your next appointment with God. Because when Joseph was thrown into the pit, God was still with him. No matter where Joseph was, God there was walking with Joseph and working in and through him. Persevere in the gift God has given you and step into the next opportunity the Lord opens up to you. Life and all its circumstances will disappoint you, yet God will never disappoint you. Try not to disappoint him. Stand tall. Do the right thing. God is still at work. Genesis chapter 39, verse 21 through 23 reads, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Verse 22, and the keeper of prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. Verse 23, the keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, meaning Joseph, the Lord made it prosper. But the Lord was with Joseph. He gave him favor. Whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. I want you to understand that no matter what you're going through, God can make that thing change in your life instantly. Instantly. As he did for Joseph. He's a God of suddenly. He would take you from the prison to the palace. Suddenly and instantly. Pharaoh had a dream, and God moves on the heart of Pharaoh's chief butler, who had been with Joseph in prison. 2 years have passed since the butler had been released and restored to Pharaoh's service. Only now is Joseph remembered 2 whole years later. The chief butler speaks to Pharaoh, and Joseph is called from the prison to the palace. In Genesis chapter 41, verse 25 and 33, it reads, Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, The dreams of the Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 33, And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Joseph was in prison for 2 years. And even when the chief butler was released, Joseph asked him to remember him. He did. 2 years later, but he did. And because of a dream that Joseph had, that he was able to interpret it to the king, he was removed from the pit to the palace. God honors Joseph's integrity. Promotion will come from the Lord. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find such one as this man, in whom in the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning, as wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. That is in Genesis chapter 41, verse 37 through 31. From the pit to the palace, and suddenly, there it is. Integrity of the heart is the path to the palace. Your willingness to do the right thing will move God to take you to the right place at the right time. 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 9 says, Serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of thoughts. People, you got to ask yourselves, what are your intentions? What are you hiding underneath those covers? Because whatever it is, God seeks them and searches them all through the hearts, and he understands your intentions as well as your thoughts. So the question is, will we do our best not to lose control over what we have control over? The integrity of our hearts? Or will we surrender to the temptations, the cravings, and the easy way out? We may not always be in control of our circumstances, but we can choose what we willingly surrender our hearts to. Look at Isaiah chapter 1, verse 19. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. Only God sees the end from the beginning. Will you trust him always and all his ways? Isaiah 46, chapter 10, Isaiah 40, chapter 46, verse 10 reads, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 8 reads, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding. Verse 6, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and depart from evil. Verse 8, it will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. God will allow things to happen, only he knows why, and he often chooses not to answer the question for us. That is his right. God sees the end from the beginning. We do not. And yet, you can certainly ask him why. He is not obligated to answer. We are the clay. He certainly is the potter. Another principle of integrity. God will often use your obedient and patient commitment to integrity to show you why. Disobedience, impatience, and weakness of character or lack of integrity will stop you hearing from God. You're going through a storm and you asking why. But the lack of your obedience or your disobedience and your lack of commitment to God and your integrity could be the reason why no longer do you hear a word from God. Another principle of integrity to be reminded is promotions come from the Lord, but it comes through promotions come from the Lord, but it comes through those above you who take notice of your integrity, meaning your bosses, people. Your bosses. So also. And the final principle is this. There is lasting satisfaction and significance. Your life can make a difference for others in the light of eternity. It adds up, people. The fulfillment of the perfect will of God in your life. So also, because your call, your blessing, and all of God's favor would certainly be your companion, but these have an even greater purpose, to be a blessing to many others. Wonderful, wonderful segment dealing with integrity. And I wanted to really share this with you tonight, because we're coming on some trying times, and there are going to be people tested, ordinary people. I'm not just talking leaders. It's so prevalent that you understand that if you're going to be blessed and have the Lord with you everywhere you go, that you have to walk in great character and certainly integrity. And that's what we wanted to share with you tonight. We thank you guys for watching. And again, if you want to sow into this ministry, you may do so by going to the website. We thank you first for tuning in again. But as being a partner or sowing into this ministry, you may do so at going to the website at www.holyspiritsradio.org, and spirits is spelled with a Z. And you may go to the contact page, and there you can give a generous donation to this ministry, and we will be so gladly appreciated. And also, we would love to hear from you all any feedback dealing with this message tonight, or any message that you have heard from us. You can also find us on YouTube at Gary Hardin, and it's Garry Hardin, Harden, and we have a multitude of sermons and speeches and shows that are on there for your viewing at your leisure. And as we always say, may God continue to keep you and bless you along your journey. We love you, and we'll see you soon. Peace, and God bless.